Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Matta here and welcome back to our mini-series that we are doing leading up to A4 release, and that is going to be covering every single deck in Pokemon Pocket. At least that is the plan today. We're talking about all of the water decks in the entire game. So again, there's literally been, almost 10,000 players this season, and a lot of different decks see play. And that's the whole idea with this video series, is that, on the channel, we mostly talk about meta decks, but there are literally hundreds and hundreds of decks that just never really see play, and we never really talk about them, and that's mainly because they're really not that good. But this video series, hopefully, is to showcase every single deck in the entire game, even the ones that are probably quite terrible. Water Pokemon are very interesting. There's a ton of different water Pokemon in the game. Water was actually one of the most dominant types in all of Pokemon Pocket until one little Pokemon was released in A3, which was Oricorio. And since Oricorio, there's been almost no water decks in the format, and I do think that Oricorio is probably the main reason for that. So there are a lot of decks to go over in this video, so we're going to fly through them very, very quickly. Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get right into it. This is every water deck in the game right now. First off, we've gotten Empoleon and Palkia. Empoleon's really interesting. I don't know if I've really ever seen anybody play this card. Aqua Jet does 80 damage, and it also does 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So some bench damage here is what's kind of happening. Palkia's Dimensional Storm also does damage to the bench, so maybe that's the whole idea here. We also have Rare Candy now, so maybe somebody was thinking, Rare Candy and Empoleon, let's go ahead and do it. Pretty cool. This is going to be Greninja and Gyarados. Yeah, so you know what? This was a deck list. This is actually a big throwback. I think this is Mythical Island, is back when this deck list saw play. But now we have Rare Candy, so I guess, and Irida. So I guess theoretically this deck list is better than it was back then, but unfortunately just not something that really ever caught on. Shout out to Wugtrio. This is Wugtrio with Manaphy, with Washout Vaporeon, and Palkia EX, and also Mew EX. It's really fun to see Mew EX. Unfortunately, most Pokemon in the game don't KO themselves. It's just something that used to be the case in a lot of decks in Pokemon Pocket. No longer really is the case. So that's why Mew EX stopped seeing play. Shout out to whoever built this deck, because this is actually pretty cool, and I love Washout Vaporeon. I thought this card was broken when it got released way back in the day, but never ended up being, I guess, that strong. Here we've got Draco Meteor, the non-EX Dragonite, and the non-EX Articuno, and then Drampa. So I assume this deck is playing dual energies. We have Irida. This might have been played in a non-EX archetype. Some of the decks here at a non-EX tournament, some of the decks that are in this video probably saw play or were played in special regulation tournaments that banned like EX cards, for example. So if you see a deck list like this, it's probably in one of those decks, but it does count as a water deck. Somebody did play it in a tournament, so we're going to talk about it here today. This Dragonite is funny because this card might end up being meta next format. We just have to wait and see. We're getting a ton of dual energy support coming in A4 and multi-energy support. I'm actually really excited about this. I think Dragonite has the potential to enter the metagame. Not only this Dragonite, but Dragonite EX. So keep your eye out for that. Anyway, there you go. Next up is going to be Greninja and Primarina, but also 2 copies of Snorlax and Ilima. So we saw this a lot in some of the other videos. There's a lot of decks that kind of just throw the old Snorlax Ilima combo in there. And the whole idea is that Snorlax just kind of soaks up hits. And then, we can kind of then set up our other Pokemon. But this is actually the Berry Snorlax combo here. So we are going to be attacking with Snorlax. Pretty fun, pretty cool. I don't really know how good any of this really was. Berry Snorlax was meta at one point, but really has never been meta since. Here is Blastoise with Greninja. So Manaphy, Blastoise EX, and Greninja. And we do have Rare Candies now. We've got Irida and we have Misties. Blastoise is another Pokemon that has always forever been on the fringe meta. Unfortunately, when Oricorio came in, it moved from like fringe meta to being like meme. And unfortunately, I think that's where a lot of these water decks are, just because Oricorio and, just all of the turbo electric type Silvally decks do exist. Magnezone is popular. Tapu Koko is a thing as well. So not a very kind format this season to water decks. So I'm actually kind of excited about this video because we get a chance to talk about some, which we never really ever do. Next up is going to be Glaceon with Araquanid. And then we have Lana. So the Araquanid Lana combination that came out, I believe, in A3 was really cool. I think a lot of people were pretty excited about this, but again, it just never really ended up being very good. 3 energies to attack with Araquanid, and it does 60 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is a basic Pokemon, it does 60 more damage, which is relevant. There's a lot of basic Pokemon in the game, and then Lana basically allows us to move up any Pokemon that we want into the active spot as long as Araquanid is in our active position. This combo is really cool. And then Pokemon Flute allowing us to kind of chain together KOs on basic Pokemon with Araquanid is cool. I don't know what Glaceon's really doing for the deck, but maybe we're just kind of pairing it with Glaceon. It's a fun strategy, not one that really ever entered the metagame, but anyway. There we go. Next up is Wigglytuff EX. It's been a long time since I've seen Wigglytuff EX, I'll be fair. But we are playing it with Manaphy and Origin Form Palkia to likely get around Oricorio. So you know what? We're even playing Poison Barb, a red card in the list. You know, we're doing stuff in here. I kind of like this deck list. You know, Wigglytuff really did get kind of power crept. I made a video about it a long time ago. Wigglytuff was meta at one point. It just has gotten progressively worse as time has gone on, much like every card in Pokemon Pocket has, to be honest. Next up, we've gotten just a mash of a bunch of different Pokemon here. We've got Pyukumuku, 2 Manaphy, 1 Regice, 1 Alola. I don't even know what this card does, I guess. I guess it puts your opponent to sleep for 3 energies, which is cool. Origin Form Palkia, Palkia EX, and Articuno. So just a mashup of water-type Pokemon. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Here's another Empoleon deck, now paired with Manaphy and Articuno EX. So, you know, Empoleon's a fun one. You know, it really is. Again, it also kind of plays into that same bench damage strategy. Articuno's Blizzard does do bench damage, and we're playing Cyrus. It's cool. I do like it. Unfortunately, I think on Empoleon, maybe, I don't know. It's weak to electric, so I don't know. I really don't. I mean, we are 1-hit KOing Oricorio. Maybe Empoleon is better than we think it is. I don't know. Wugtrio. Everybody remembers Wugtrio, right? No? Just me? Wugtrio EX was, when it came out, definitely one of the more interesting Pokemon from that expansion. I think that was also A3, I could be wrong. But yeah, Wugtrio EX, and now we're just pairing it with Gyarados. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say. We gotta go quickly. There's a lot of decks in this video. Here is Wigglytuff in Primarina. So, you know, that was definitely something that I think a lot of people considered. Wigglytuff, plus the healing with Primarina, plus Irida and leftovers. It's just a ton of healing. We're going to probably see a lot of Primarina decks in this video. The main reason why Primarina just never really entered the metagame or was super relevant in the metagame was basically Electro-type decks were popular, and those Electro-type decks were very fast-paced. Not only that, but the damage output from Primarina just doesn't really do enough, and we're just not even, like, there's too many Pokemon that are 2-hit KOing us no matter what, even with all of the healing, and that's just the significant downside to Primarina. A big reason why I probably never saw that much play. Here we've got Stoutland. So like we talked about in the previous video, Stoutland is just one of those Pokemon that, you know, it just ends up seeing play in every kind of deck because it's colorless and, you know, it's not a bad Pokemon. No real synergy here with Palkia, but, you know, why not just kind of pair it with whatever, right? I guess it's people's mentalities. Here is Greninja Articuno, but we are playing a 1-1 Sylveon lineup. So, you know, I guess, again, the idea here, why not just kind of play Sylveon in the deck? We can draw through the deck a bit more quickly, hopefully to find our rare candies and evolve into Greninja. The main downside to this deck is that, of course, Articuno is just really not that strong anymore. You know, it's not really taking that many KOs. 80 damage is just bad when, you know, these EX Stage 2 Pokemon are healing for 60. I mean, it really does feel like it's been power crept pretty heavily. It's just a relatively weak Pokemon now. Here is Wugtrio yet again, now with Pyukumuku, also one of the more underrated Pokemon in the game, I think, right now. Rocky Helmet Pyukumuku is actually really, really cool. And I think it's really fun because it's just a card that is good. I think it's actually better than, like, Druddigon. But there are ways around it. The #1 deck in the game is playing, like, 2 Cyrus, 2 Greninja, so, you know, that's a little bit tough. We even have a Silazar thrown in here, which is another Pokemon that I just never have seen before, really, which is pretty cool. Here is Starmie EX. This is the first time we're seeing Starmie EX. Man, we've talked at length in the Discord server about Starmie and how it's literally Silvally, but worse. And I think that's hilarious that they basically power crept Starmie with a colorless non-EX Pokemon. I mean, Silvally literally is the same exact card, but just better in every way. Let's pair it with Crabominable, another card that I actually think was pretty decent. It's basically Water-type Executor, which is kind of cool if you think about it. But again, this is a deck that entirely gets walled by Oricorio. Yes, Crabrawler is here, but I don't trust it. Anyway, here is Araquanid with Primarina. Again, we're kind of just throwing a bunch of cards together here. We do have 1 Hau, 1 Lana, 1 Lily, 1 Irida, 1 Misty. So just one-ofs of everything. Maybe we draw which one we want. You never really know. Primarina here now with Cramorant and actually the Hyper Whirlpool Vaporeon. This is the old one, I think, that heals, right? Oh no, this is the one that does discard energy. So this is the new Vaporeon. Okay. So this Vaporeon does discard energies, which is kind of funny. Never saw play. 3 energies is just a little bit too much, even with Misties. People just don't even play Misty anymore. But Cramorant's a really interesting one. So Cramorant's one of those Pokemon where if you attack, you have a 50% chance of, like, being immune next turn, and that's kind of fun. Unfortunately, things like Sabrina and Cyrus do just kind of get around this effect. But anyway, yeah, Cramorant is definitely really, really cool. Here is Crabrawler, actually just kind of a straight Crabrawler deck with Mew EX. So this is fun. Whenever I see Mew EX, I get happy because it brings me back. Mew EX it was one of the better EX Pokemon of all time. We thought it would be relevant for a long time. But unfortunately, the way that they built and created Pokemon and released Pokemon in the game just didn't make Mew EX helpful. So I just thought that was really interesting. Back in the day, like we had Charizard, we had Palkia, we had Mewtwo, we had a bunch of strong Pokemon that would KO themselves, right? If you were to copy their attack. Now all of the most relevant Pokemon in the game have more HP than attack that they deal. Just the way that the game goes now. So Mew EX, unfortunately, just not as relevant anymore. Here is Blastoise, just kind of straight Blastoise with Rare Candy and Manaphy. Again, you know, just Oricorio is all I have to say about this particular deck. So there we go. We've got Mewtwo with Greninja with Articuno. Have we not taken a look at this deck before? I feel like we just saw this deck. Maybe not. Oh, no, the one we saw was with Sylveon. You know, Greninja Articuno, it was a deck at one point, and it's really not a terrible deck. It's just like power creep exists. And again, Oricorio exists. Greninja can actually get around Oricorio, to be fair, but it's just hard to contend, you know? Like, whenever they released Rare Candy and Lily to all of these Stage 2 decks, like these Rare Candy decks, it really did make a lot of Pokemon just non-viable anymore. Like, you can't just be hitting for 80 damage. Like, you're gonna take 4 hits to KO, you know, a Solgaleo EX. It just doesn't work, really. Next up, we have a Alolan Sandslash with Primarina. This is really cool. I actually really love Alolan Sandslash. So it is a Stage 1 Pokemon with 1 energy in its attack cost, and it's got Spike Armor. So you only do 20, but if you get attacked on your opponent's next turn, they take 40 damage. And that, I mean, that's a lot. Or I mean, that's 60 damage if they attack you, right? I actually kind of like Alolan Sandslash. I really do. Maybe it deserves to see more play, maybe not. And it's being paired with Primarina EX, so why not? And we also have Hau. So yeah, there you go. Here is Palkia with Origin Form Palkia and Manaphy. So, you know, this combo here, Palkia, Origin Form Palkia, I don't know if people who are watching this played back then, but, you know, it really was. Like, before Oricorio, the water type, you know, like Palkia, Manaphy stuff was actually really strong. I think it was Gyarados, realistically, though, that was kind of like the main carrier of that archetype. But there was a long period of time where water, before Oricorio came out, water really was like the most strongest, like dominant archetype in the entire game, which is kind of sad to see the fall from grace. So I don't know if there's any way around that, quite frankly. But anyway, there you go. That's my tangent. Here is Wugtrio with Palkia. I don't have anything to say about this. You know, just like all of the other videos, there's just not that many water type Pokemon. Like, Pokemon Pocket has been around for some time, but there's really only so many relevant Pokemon, and it's really all about just kind of pairing them together and mismatching them in different ways. So, you know, decks like these, it's like, what can we even say? You know what I mean? Here is a non-EX Vaporeon only deck. Again, I don't know what this deck could possibly be achieving other than hitting for, I guess, 70 and 60 damage and maybe discarding some energies or healing or whatever. It's not bad. It's probably was seen playing like a non-EX archetype, but anyway, yeah, there it is. Here is Palkia with Washout Vaporeon and Manaphy, but now we're also playing the new Glaceon. So this is pretty cool. This Ice Blade Glaceon does do 50 to a bench Pokemon, which is not bad. One of the new evolutions that really never saw play. A lot of them actually really weren't that good. I know some people were really hype about Espeon and Umbreon. They really weren't that good. Neither's Glaceon, but anyway, there you go. There's a deck with it. Here is Primarina and Shiinotic. So here's a very interesting one. No, I don't think you should play Shiinotic as opposed to, like, this is basically Solgaleo, right? But we're playing Primarina instead of Solgaleo, and that makes things a lot worse because, again, like, if Shiinotic's in the active spot, we have no way to get out of the active spot. And that's definitely a downside. Solgaleo doesn't have that issue, but that deck definitely will. Here is Sylveon and Blastoise with Misties. You know, this deck list probably isn't that bad. And we also have one of the Hyper Whirlpool Vaporeon, right? To just get around Oricorio. So this deck list is actually built very similarly to how Charizard is built. It's basically like a Charizard clone, but it's Blastoise. And that to me makes me like this deck list, actually. I really do. It's probably not that bad, if we're being honest with you. Like, it's probably totally a fine deck. Next up is Wugtrio with Silvally. So you know what? You know, why not? If we're playing Silvally, like, let's just throw Wugtrio into it and maybe it kind of works out. I don't know how we're getting the water energies onto Wugtrio because we're attaching to Silvally. Silvally's just a purely better Pokemon than Wugtrio. And Wugtrio does take 3 energies to attack. That's kind of been the downside to Wugtrio throughout its entire lifespan, is that it takes 3 energies, which is kind of tough, especially when it's like, you know, you're not even guaranteed really to do much damage with it. I guess you are guaranteed, but you don't know where the damage is going. Wugtrio is a funny Pokemon. Here is Starmie EX. Again, you know, Starmie's just worse Silvally. Like, this, it's hilarious. Like, if you were to take this exact deck and you were to just play, you know, like the Silvally Galeo package instead of Starmie, like, this is just a better deck list. Like, that's just what it comes down to. And again, you know, maybe this was played in a weird format tournament where, like, the modern cards weren't legal. Like, you never know. But yeah, Starmie, just, it's hilarious. It's just one of the funniest cases in all of Pokemon Pocket. Here's Gyarados. So yeah, I mean, you know, Gyarados is a thing. I think that Gyarados, again, also got power crept, and it also just got kind of pushed out because of Oricorio. If we're playing Gyarados, we have to play it with other Pokemon that can counter Oricorio. But even then, like, you're going up up against Silvally, right? And like that's like kind of a tough case here. Gyarados was always like a weird ramp deck, and yes, you could get lucky with Misties, but like for the most part, Gyarados was doing kind of nothing for like 3 or 4 turns, and that was okay when the entire format other than Gyarados was Giratina and Darkrai, which is also a slow ramp deck. Now we've got Silvallis and like Oricorios and like Charizard stoking on turn 2. Like it just doesn't, like the format isn't nearly as kind to Gyarados. But to be fair, I think Gyarados is still a strong Pokemon in the game. 180 damage is crazy. Our HP rather. Okay, Glaceon with Greninja Manaphy. Yeah, so have we talked about Glaceon much? You know, Glaceon is definitely one of the worst evolution cards. It's just not that good. Like, there's no other way to describe it. It's 3 energies, 90 damage. All of the other evolutions do like 80 for 2, which is, again, a big upgrade from that attack. And yes, the ability does exist, but it's 10 damage once per turn, and it's at the end of your turn and put in like checkup, which is horrible. I mean, that's just a very bad ability. I don't know why they made Glaceon so bad. I don't know what else to really say about it. Here is Greninja and Cramorant. Again, probably just a non-EX format tournament deck here. Again, Cramorant's funny. It's just about flipping coins, getting lucky, and being immune. And then we have Greninja, we've got Cyrus. You know, it's a funny strategy. Cramorant definitely can win games. Next up here, we've got Primarina and Starmie. With a bunch of one-of trainers, so I don't know what's really going on here. The Poison Barb's kind of throwing me for a loop, I will say, but yeah, Starmie, 1-1 Starmie lineup is just nuts. Like, that's just crazy to see. Like, throwing 1-1 Starmie, Staryu Starmie lineup into any deck is probably just making the deck objectively worse, which is kind of funny. Here is just a mash of different cards here. 1 Mugtrio, 1 Greninja, 1 Primarina. So there you go. I mean, what can we even say about a deck like this? Absolutely incredible. Here is Primarina with Palkia, so I guess there is some merit here. We are definitely just like hoping to get lucky on Misties and drawing into it and whatnot, but we do have Rare Candy, right? So Primarina, we've got Pokécom, some Giant Capes to extend our Pokemon's HP. You know, it's not bad. I mean, Palkia is still a decent card, but again, I don't know what our deck is really doing against Oricorio. I guess we're a bit reliant on the small Primarina to get around Oricorio. That's probably not a great strategy, to be honest. Here we have Wishy-Washy. So I don't know if I really have ever talked about Wishy-Washy on the channel. You know, this is a deck list that actually is really strong. Wishy-Washy is one of the strongest Pokemon like that we've ever gotten in the entire game. The one hilarious part about Wishy-Washy is that the entire archetype is built around having no counter to Oricorio, and it's also weak to Oricorio. So like, if Oricorio wasn't released literally at the exact same time as Wishy-Washy, it would have been a really strong archetype. But unfortunately, it gets entirely beaten. It like literally auto loses against Oricorio, which I find to be just pretty funny in the grand scheme of things. Shout out to Wishy-Washy. In another timeline, this deck is insane, but Oricorio exists, and unfortunately, Wishy-Washy it can't. It just loses. Here is Blastoise. I feel like we've actually already talked about this. Here's just Blastoise and Manaphy. Maybe we haven't seen this deck before. I don't know. And next up, we've gotten Silvally with Glaceon and Sylveon and Palkia and Manaphy. So just a bunch of cards, you know, you just put them all together. You'll get something will happen, right? That's the idea here. 1 Gladion is nuts. Oh, this is just oh no, I was gonna say, is this a 1-of format? It's not. 2 Pokeball, 2 Research, 2 Eevee. I was gonna say, this could be like a singleton format deck. I don't know. I have no opinions about this really. I'll be honest with you. Next up is going to be Glaceon and what is this? Nihilego and Pyukyu. So that's funny, I guess. I mean, what is this? It's poison. We actually saw something like this with fire, right? I forget what it was in a previous video. I mean, like the poison Pyukyu, like poison barb stuff is kind of funny. Like it does kind of work. There is some synergy going on here. There's some like real planning and like actual concepts that are happening with this deck list, which I think is pretty fun. I'm not gonna lie. I think we have to skip ahead here. Yeah, okay, sorry. Here is like a pure water evolution deck, which is pretty cool. So we've got Glaceon, both EX and non-EX. We even have like the other Glaceon. I forgot we had a non-EX Glaceon before the new one. Ice Beam, 60 damage. Flip a coin, your opponent's Pokemon is now paralyzed. Actually better probably than the new Glaceon, which is pretty funny. Washout Vaporeon and Eevee. I don't really know what the Washout Vaporeon's doing here per se, because we're not like playing Manaphy or any way to like get a bunch of energies. We're playing 4 Eevees and then just a bunch of the water type evolutions. Unfortunately, none of them are that good, which is kind of interesting if you think about it like that. And next up, Crabrawler and Glaceon is pretty cool. Have we taken a look at these before? I feel like I'm going crazy. Am I not going crazy? Anyway, Crabrawler and Glaceon, there it is. Here is Starmie Palkia. This is a throwback. I mean, so this was a deck that people definitely played at one point. Nothing else to really say about it. Like I said, Savali Palkia would literally be better, and it did actually do well in a tournament, I think last format or the format before, which is funny. Now we're getting into some, like, I guess, real decks. So this is Giratina and Greninja with Pyukumuku. So we've actually seen this in the metagame this format, just without Oricorio. This is just a pure, I guess, water and you know, psychic type deck. It's not bad. You know, we're running Cyrus, Giratina, Greninja, so it can't be that bad. Instead of, you know, the Sylveon lineup, I guess we're just playing Pyukumuku, which is pretty funny, all things considered. Next up is Primarina and Crabrawler. I feel like we've seen this, or Crabominable. I feel like we've seen this exact deck before. I don't know. Maybe it's different. I can't remember. We've taken a look at so many water decks. Here's 18 Trainer Articuno. So this is again another throwback. Somebody played this. I don't know. Maybe it was a throwback tournament. Who knows? 18 Trainer Articuno doesn't exist. Isn't a deck anymore because of Oricorio. That's the reality of it. I mean, we literally auto-lose to Oricorio. Funny deck, though. Kind of gives me old throwback vibes. Here is Sweet Relay. Sweet's Relay, but the water-type version. So instead of, like, the grass thing, I forget what that Pokemon's called, we're playing Vanillish. Effectively, I think, like, the same decks as the grass-type one. Instead of having a grass-type attacker, we also have a water-type attacker. I don't think it really matters, but we are playing water energies on this deck, so it does count as a water deck. Okay, so here's also a Greninja Giratina, but we're actually playing one Espeon instead of like a Pyukumuku or like Sylveon or whatever. So, you know, I don't know. You know, it's Espeon. I think this deck is entirely carried by the two Greninja, two Giratina, and two Cyrus, to be honest. I don't know if the Espeon's really doing anything in here, but anyway, there it is. Here is Gyarados with Manaphy. I feel like we've also seen this deck before in the video. I can't remember, dude. We're flying so many water decks, so many water Pokemon. Here is Primarina with Sylveon. So we saw Primarina and Shiinotic. This is probably just a better version of it. But again, it's the same struggles where it's like, you know, like if it just doesn't really work. You know, the same with like Incineroar is like Sylveon is good. It allows you to move through your deck, but we have to attach to Sylveon to retreat. And that's just a turn that we're not attaching to Primarina. I think that's just the inherent downside to all of these strategies other than Charizard, honestly, and Solgaleo. Crabominable and Palkia. I guess we haven't seen this combo before in the video, but yeah, throw them together. It's a deck list. We're actually playing Poison Barb, Rocky Helmet, Repel. Quite interesting nonetheless. Here is Silvally in Primarina, probably the best way to play Primarina, and that's just because it's playing Silvally, and which again is hilarious, right? Silvally just kind of makes decks better because it's just a really, really strong Pokemon. Next up is actually, again, going to be the Greninja Giratina combo, but we're actually playing two Snorlax EX and Ilima with leftovers. So, you know, I don't know. Snorlax to me was something that I thought actually had a lot more potential than maybe some people give it credit for. Still one of my favorite Pokemon in the entire game. Maybe it will end up seeing play, but I think it objectively kind of gets pseudo nerfed because Lugia is now entering the format and does 180 damage. But anyway, so there it is. There's that deck list. Here's another Primarina deck with Greninja. I feel like we've already talked about this. Again, I can't remember. We've talked about so many decks in this video. Here's another Primarina deck. This one's got Pyukumuku. So cool, you know, that exists. Here's literally the same deck. I don't know why it's in here also. I guess because we're playing the small Primarina. That makes it a different deck list. Now we're getting into like actual decks. Okay, so now we've made it into like real meta decks. So this is Oricorio with Greninja and Sylveon and Giratina. So, you know, to be fair, like out of all of the Oricorio decks of the format that saw play, this one was probably the worst, like in terms of like the meta decks. It did actually get a couple of decent placements at large tournaments, but it never had a high win rate, and it was never really a deck that I recommended. I think we kept it in B tier basically all format. And now we've gotten the #1 deck of the format. Isn't that crazy? Yes, I do consider this to be a water deck because it plays water energies and it plays Greninja. So yes, after all of that, after talking about how, you know, there's literally, I guess, hundreds of water decks that are not meta, the #1 deck of the format technically is a water deck. So here you go, Greninja, Sylveon, Giratina. We've talked about it ad nauseum. I actually made a video about this deck list. Definitely go check it out. Probably the most successful deck in the entire game. So anyway, guys, there you go. There is every water deck in Pokemon Pocket right now this season. Again, shout out to everybody. If I covered your deck list, if you're watching this video and your deck was here, then there you go. Because I basically took every water deck that saw play in tournaments this format. So anyway, guys, that's the third video of this series. We got some more coming. That was every water deck that saw play. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I am absolutely tired. I'm pre-recording all of these videos in a row. And again, I'm just sort of doing this because I'm going to be gone this weekend. And then, you know, we're kind of leading up into A4. So I just needed something, I guess, to put on the channel. Maybe you guys find this interesting, maybe not. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah, peace out.